concept was we identify young college students all over the country, and they go into poor areas to live and work, but they would be inside the boundaries of the United States of America. So, and we would get military deferment if we went into Vista or the Peace Corps back in the 1960s. Do you know what a military deferment is?
No, I don't.
That instead of getting drafted, we could put off going into the United States Army if our number was called as young males. And then back then they didn't draft women into the Army or the armed forces, but they did women. I mean, they did men. And we were in a war against Vietnam. As a student at the University of Washington, I did not see Vietnamese people, these Asian people, 10,000 miles away from me as my enemy. I did not want to go and fight them, but I also did not want to go to jail for refusing the draft or move to Canada, which a lot of young cats my age were doing in order to avoid the draft because they objected to war. I chose to join Vista, not to help the poor, but to stay out of the United States Army. But as a result of joining Vista, I was sent from the central area of Seattle, where I had moved back to from Beacon Hill when I became a college student, to New York City. And I ended up working in poor areas on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and in central Harlem. And that experience of being in Vista 1 year completely radicalized me. When I went in, I was just a Negro college student who was not able to pursue his dream of becoming a basketball player because I was so short, and I wasn't allowed to turn out for the University of Washington's team, so I focused on academics. So I wanted to be a teacher and, you know, make a decent salary so I can take care of myself. That was my goal the first couple of years in college. But then when I went into Vista and they sent me to live amongst the poor of people in New York, it completely changed me. You might say, why did it change me? Well, I was from a poor working class black family in Seattle, but I lived on 18th between, I lived on Alder Street between 18th and 19th. And my experience was having about 6 ghetto houses on this side, 6 on this side, and not over 105 people living in that block. When I moved into central Harlem, I lived on 117th Street between Lenox and 7th, and myself and one other Vista and a couple of neighborhood volunteers we went to each apartment on that block, and we did a count of how many people lived on there, and we came up with 9,200 from one corner to the next, and we found that about 1,500 of the residents were under the age of 12, living on one block. And we got statistics on the economic background of the families that lived in our area, and we found that over 50% of them were poor, and another 25% were people just a little bit above the poverty line. So they didn't have the means to make ends meet. And we found that only there were 566,000 people living in Harlem at that time, and they only had one high school. And paradoxically, it had the same name as the high school I had gone to. It's called Franklin High School, but there was no other high school. And then you read in the newspaper about the horrific dropout rate of young people in New York City. Well, there was no education options, opportunity available to them. You read every day in the New York Times about the high and growing level of drug addiction, heroin in particular back then. And it became easy for me to see how living in these abject poverty conditions, no money, apartments of 1 and 2 bedrooms that on average had 6 to 8 people living in each one, was a horrifically negative situation to live in.